Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be talking about both primary weapons and secondary weapons. I am putting them together in the same video because there aren't that many differences between them. The main difference to keep in mind between them is the fact that there are different individual options, and that's going to determine what sorts of combinations that you're able to use. Since, both slots pick from completely different weapon pools. So for example, Glaxion and Lens are both notable weapons for their cold procs mainly. Whereas if you look at secondary weapons, there aren't any secondary weapons with cold procs. And so while there aren't that many differences between primary weapons and secondary weapons, if you do want to be able to use either one for cold procs, you'd have to use a prime weapon for that. So with that said, I'm going to start off by talking about a lot of the various deciding factors between them. So the main thing that you would probably want to look at when it comes to weapons is their DPS, because DPS, of course, generally equates to kill time. Or you can just look at it as kill time in general, because there are some sort of weird interactions with that. Well, not really weird interactions, but for example, if you look at something like Snipetron, its DPS might be like relatively low, but because it kills in 2 shots and doesn't have any like charge up or anything, it's actually a weapon that can generally kill really fast. And similar goes for weapons like Daikyu and whatever. Anything that has like generally high per shot damage, you can have a considerably lower kill time than what its DPS would normally suggest. The weapons with the best DPS and kill times are generally weapons that don't have any special effects. So if you look at weapons like Karak, Daikyu, and Exane, they all basically just deal like straight up damage, and so like there's nothing like special added to them. They're not like especially easy to hit with because of AoE or anything. And especially in the case of something like Daikyu, it has some extra power to compensate for being charge up and for being a projectile. So generally, like the harder weapon is to use and stuff, the more DPS you're going to be rewarded with for it. But of course, you would want to look at individual stats for that, because then there are outliers like Null, which have a relatively low DPS in comparison to the skill which people generally agree that it requires to use. So stuff like low magazine capacity and non-hit scan projectiles are things to especially look out for if you're really looking for high DPS. And another thing which generally correlates with higher DPS is range. And range is also a pretty important general factor, even if like not specific if you're looking for DPS. Because weapons have like there are various sets of advantages and different disadvantages, and a lot of that actually does come down to range. So if you look at something like say Tiger's Prime, it's going to be able to kill a lot faster than something like Karak, but it's only going to be able to do so from up close, and that could make it hard to use depending on what sort of playstyle and other loadout choices you have. Then there are also damage types, which I think most players would be familiar with if they've played in either mode for a while. So if you look at something like Karak, it has impact damage mainly, so it's going to do a lot better against shields than it does against health or armor. Whereas something like Vandal is pretty much the opposite of that. There are also many elemental weapons in Conclave which have their effectiveness differences in very much the same way, just different individual differences. For example, corrosive is pretty much like a much better version of Puncture if you're looking at damage to health and armor, but it's going to be a lot weaker against shields. That also leads me to status though, and the thing about status effects in Conclave is that most elemental weapons will deal their elemental procs guaranteed on hit. So if you look at a weapon like Glaxion, Staticor, or Ignis, they're guaranteed a proc if you can get hits with them, rather than having a luck-based status chance. There are some exceptions, like toxin weapons won't usually proc. I've never seen one of them proc, but I think there are some special instances where you can get that to happen. But generally, you're not going to be seeing toxin procs, and then the other proc you're not going to be seeing is viral. But other than that, most if not all of the elemental procs are in Conclave, and they are generally guaranteed with weapons that have those elemental damage types. Now I want to talk about some of the general differences between primary and secondary weapons. Before I mentioned that there are some individual options that are worth keeping in mind, because that's going to influence the different combinations that you can use, but there are also some general differences, such as DPS, where there is a slight general trend of secondaries having lower DPS than primaries, but it is generally a very slight case, and normally there can be more of a DPS difference based on the other factors which generally correlate with DPS, like having non-hit-scan projectiles and lower magazine capacity. Other than that, there is also a difference in modding. A notable thing about primaries is that their modding is split into different categories, while secondaries, it's a little bit split, but less so. For example, assault rifles have a mod which will boost your mobility a little bit for a few seconds after hitting a headshot. This is something which I often use on my Dare Vandal. And if I wanted to use a secondary substitute for Dare Vandal, I wouldn't be able to have this effect because the secondaries don't have that mod, or a mod that functions like it. And a lot of things can be said about the different categories in primaries, like how snipers have some exclusive mods, which secondaries also don't have. Well, secondaries also have their share of exclusive mods, like a mod which increases the blast radius of most AoE weapons, while lowering their flight speed. So just a lot of different individual modding options, but that applies pretty broadly between the weapons, since these are whole categories of weapons that either have or are missing these mods. With that said, I want to talk a bit more about these general categories, starting with assault rifles and the pistols which are similar to them. So if you look at something like Latron, Karak, and Axtiletto, they're similar in the sense that they all, just fire bullets that don't really have any special effects. And, the main advantage of these weapons is that, they're really average, which can be a disadvantage in some ways. But, that's the main notable trait about them, is that, they don't really have any, major disadvantages, anything, really taken away to balance other advantage that they would otherwise have. So then if you look at it, a category like snipers, they do have generally low kill time, high range and stuff, but their usual disadvantages like being more they require more accuracy in general to use, and then they also have some other weird little intricacies like generally being unable to use auto reload mods and stuff. So if you look at basically every other weapon category, well most other weapon categories, they'll be able to auto reload if you have them holstered, whereas snipers, they both generally have longer reload times while also not being able to auto reload. And then there are a lot of other mods that you can't put on them, like mods which increase magazine capacity and stuff. And then next category would be shotguns. And there are a lot of pistol shotguns, but like I said, pistol modding isn't really split into these categories, so you're gonna see a lot of the same mods across pistols, whereas primaries, they have like different sets of mods which do the same thing because they have different categories. So shotguns, they don't really have many special mods. There are some which I'll talk about in a video specific to modding, but you're gonna see a lot of similar mods to what you would see on primaries, or just different versions of those mods. Where while shotguns are missing some things like the headshot mobility mod, the main advantage that they have is their overall DPS or kill time, because that's what shotguns are mainly meant for. And of course they'll have that disadvantage of generally needing a closer range to be effective. So then we have the AoE weapons. And the major thing about AoE weapons is that they're all projectile weapons, so you'll generally need some degree of shot bleeding to be able to use them well. But in exchange, they'll have an area of effect, which is what AoE stands for. And so that will be useful for people with, say, just lower accuracy in general. It'll be a lot easier to hit a target, although you will have to be able to complete shots to a degree, so this is going to depend on which skill you're better at. And then within all these different categories, there are going to be a fair amount of special weapons, which are special in their own ways. So if you look at something like Zenith, a cool thing about Zenith is that it can let you detect enemies through walls and have infinite punch through. And so that's an example of, a weapon with a special effect. You're not really going to get that on any other weapon. And on some weapons, you're going to have very few options for, whatever effect you're looking for. So sort of like what I mentioned about cold procs, you can consider that special to a degree. And, you only have 2 weapon options in terms of primaries and secondaries, which you can use that on. Which you can have that with. And then there are also some weapons which are special because of modding and stuff, which I'll talk about now. So, for example, there's Despair, which has a mod called Draining Gloom. And what Draining Gloom does is it'll lower magazine capacity, but it'll create AoEs which will drain the opponent's energy if they're hit by it. And so that's something that you can only really get on Despair, which is one of my favorite weapons, by the way. So now I'm going to talk more about general modding, because there are some highly notable mods which I think everyone should keep in mind to some degree. For example, the halter speed mods, which are the mods which will allow you to swap your weapons faster. These are major mods because, as a lot of people know, the default weapon swap speed is kind of slow, and in Conclave you generally need to be kind of quick. and so these are a major advantage to have. The only drawback that come at is at a mod slot, which you generally won't be filling up anyway on your weapon builds, although there are some exceptions. So these are mods which I would say are very much worth using. There's also the auto reload mods, which basically everything except for most launchers and all snipers lack. And so these mods, they will reload 20% of your magazine while your weapon is holstered. So they sort of go hand in hand with the holster speed mods, although they do work well independently. There's just not much reason to not use them both unless they're just not options.
You command the Oro now.
And then there are also the regeneration mods. So these are mods which will they'll sacrifice the effectiveness of health orbs. But on kill, they'll allow you to regenerate health and or shields, depending on which mods you have on. And again, these apply to basically everything except for snipers. And these are generally really good for sustainability. The only real exception is if you're doing a lot of melee killing. So you might need health orbs to regenerate since melee doesn't have these. But other than that, these are really good mods to use. And so if you're going to be even doing like half of your killing with your primary or whatever, these are highly worth considering. The last modding category which I want to talk about in this video is the conversion mods. Now what these mods do is they'll take 20% of your weapon's total damage and convert into a different physical damage type. Now the weird thing with these mods is that you would expect them to be used for shifting the damage to a damage type that's more preferable for your preferred target. So let's say that you're using something like a Rubico. So say you have a Rubico, you might be interested in converting some of that damage into puncture to better deal with targets like Nidus, Inaros, Valkyr, or whatever has good armor. Or you might be using a Karak and you might want to convert some of that damage into impact. Even though it's mostly impact, you could convert more of it into impact in order to better deal with shields, because that might be what you have it particularly for. But there is a weird thing which I think is known as damage quantization, which will basically alter the weapon's total damage based on the spread of the different damage types. And so, as always, I do have a link to the Conclave Discord server, which has some commands and a lot of info about this, which is really helpful. And so you would use these conversion mods to get to a preferable damage type spread, which would maximize your total damage rather than finding a preferable damage type spread based on what your target is. And there's some exceptions to that, like you can, like with some weapons, it can be beneficial to use a conversion that is specifically meant for switching damage to a type based on a preferable target. But generally speaking, you're just going to get more damage from switching to the preferable damage type, and a lot of those exceptions you do sacrifice total damage to deal a little bit more damage to a specific sort of target. So again, you can go to the Conclave Discord server for more information on that. I'm not going to explain it any more than that. And that's all for now. I will try to explain, modding in general more in a different video. But I think that's everything that you really need to know about primary weapons. I mean, about primary weapons and secondary
Annihilation
weapons.
is yours.
So that's all for now. See you all later.